Hello, everyone. I'm Mauro Vines from the Lucille Theater. I'm the general manager, and this month we are celebrating Native American Month. And today we want to uplift John Scott-Richardson. John is an actor, he's a writer, singer. Well, John, you are a lot of things. Welcome and thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a great day, and just happy to be here spending this time with you.
Thank you. So, we want to know you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Maybe tell us a little about your family.
Okay. Well, first of all, Biwa Peleok, under Wasteka, my name is John Scott-Richardson, and I'm an enrolled member of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe. The Haliwa-Saponi people are in eastern North Carolina. I also have Six Nations, the Tuscarora Nation lineage in my bloodline as well. But I am an enrolled member of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe. And so that's sort of our formal introduction because basically I come from a community that we recognize our ancestors, we recognize our area of land that we are stewardship of, as well as our connection. And so that's kind of, I come with that introduction. And so it may be a little long in some cases, but it's our formal way of introduction and acknowledging that we're just not, we are a culmination of all of that, right? So that's who I am here today, and as well as myself. And yeah, I come from a small community in North Carolina. You may still hear my accent.
I still have an accent, don't worry.
And so, yeah, it's just been a wonderful journey to have moved to New York from that area of the country to explore and expand myself and expand my experiences with not just film and television, but with theater, as well as other personal endeavors like cultural presentations, as well as work, working and building relationships with people outside. It's been a great experience. And so I've been here now about 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's been a whirlwind. I visited here before because I had a brother that went to school up this way, but never had really been immersed in like the New York environment. And since then, it is definitely something very, very special.
Very different.
Yes. And so yeah, but yeah.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So when did you start doing theater?
Actually, when I was in North Carolina, I used to work a youth advocacy program with the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, and it was to help communities deal with the issue of habitual smoking and tobacco abuse, which leads to cancer and in some cases leads to other drug abuses, And so I wrote 2 plays for the youth to actually get, to bring their message forth to a large audience. And that was my first personal, and it was very rough. I mean, there was no teaching. I didn't go to school to formally know how to do that. I just did it, right? And it was so exciting. The youth loved it. That was really what excited me, was to see how they became engaged with the process, right? Because a lot of times we get in these pigeonholes of, just doing things a certain way. But when I brought this idea to the youth, they got on board. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, and I let them, help co-write some of their own parts, which was great, and that was my first introduction to theater. And then from there, I started taking some acting classes in North Carolina at North Raleigh Creative Theater. And I was in my first stage performance, was called The Glass Menagerie. I played a police officer.
Oh, wow.
In New York in like that time period, right? Which is, it was non-traditional casting, of course, but it was a great experience for me and had never done theater before. And here I am in my late 30s, and doing theater, whether in writing theater, as well as performing and learning. And then I moved to New York and I auditioned for a play called Powwow Highway, written by William S. Yellow Robe Jr., who is just recently left us and crossed over to the spirit world. But AMERINDA, the company I work for now as a theater program director, was producing it. And I auditioned and I landed a role in my first play in New York. And I was excited. Okay. But my brother, who again, like I said, was living here at the time, who I was staying with when I moved here to New York, he told me that's a pretty big deal. And it, of course, it's an off Broadway, production, because, it's a very low funded organization. I said, but he said, that's a big deal. And I still personally didn't understand what he meant. But in going through the process, I started to understand what he meant. And basically, I learned that the New York, the mindset around theater and the culture around theater is totally different than anywhere else in the country, right? Because this is like the Mecca of theater. It the whole part of the economy, part of the infrastructure of the city is built to support theater, right? Because it was something that they did during the Great Depression time, was to really create the support for theater. And so it brings people from all over the world to come to Broadway, right? Or come to off-Broadway venues and see these plays. And he said, they take it pretty seriously here. Then I got really nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not trained. I don't know, and I'm on stage with, people that are trained in Shakespeare and all that. I'm like, oh, but yes. And so it's been a great experience, and I still get excited thinking about that, because I was such a baby, and here I am in my 40s, 30s, 40s. And it's like, wow, actually in my 40s. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, and it changed my life. Literally. It changed my life.
But John, I think maybe acting was your call, because you are also part of a few shows, TV shows. So is it different? Do you like theater more than TV?
Well, again, my initial goal, was to come here to further career in film and television. I had did a television. I was a reoccurring role on a show called Banshee. And it's funny how New York has this connection to a lot of things that I've done, right? But I actually, for Banshee, which was on Cinemax, I actually auditioned for that in New York. I drove to New York when they were casting their first season. I drove to New York. It was like, that's 12 hours from where I'm at in North Carolina. So it's a 12-hour drive from where I was living. Drove to New York, got here at like 12 o'clock that night, asked my brother, how do I take the train to the audition? Because I've never taken a train before by myself. And not even with him, because he drove everywhere when we lived here. When he lived here. So I get on the train, go to the audition, and so nervous I couldn't remember my lines, and the lady was like, oh, you can hold your sides, it's okay. And I was like, okay. So that helped. And I felt like I did a pretty good, audition, considering I was not fully trained and had been doing this for years and years, right? So I go back, I get a call from the casting director saying that your audition was really good. You'll be considered, which is kind of rare, because usually they don't call you unless they want to call you for a callback or something like that, right? You rarely hear anybody. And so I was pretty excited. So I went back to North Carolina, drove back that day after the audition, and I was unemployed at the time, sitting at home, because had just recently moved back into my home in North Carolina. And so I was like, wow, maybe this is my story. This is the moment, right? That I get to write this big story that I drove to New York and I got cast. Well, unbeknownst to me, they later dropped the East Coast casting, the casting company in New York, and picked up another company in the South, because the storyline started for Banshee started with the guy leaving the mob in New York, right? And he left and fled. He supposedly went to an Amish town in Pennsylvania that was the storyline, right? And so I'm like, man, I didn't get it, and I was upset because I thought I had a call back, and all of this. Well, fast forward, like a few months later, I get a call to say, well, if you want to, because they are filming it in North Carolina, you can come be an extra, right? So again, I was unemployed. I said, well, why not? I'll go be an extra and, hang out. Maybe something magical will happen. They'll say, hey, you want us to speak this 2 lines and we give you a speaking role, and who knows, what might happen, right? So I go down. I had an amazing conversation with an elder that I met actually for the first time, who was actually in it as playing a native, role in the project, who is a great mentor and an inspiration to me, actually, Mr. Russell Means. A lot of people know him from like Last of the Mohegans and these other films, but very also part of a very strong activist and doing the American Indian movement in the 70s. And so I went, and I was just an extra. But the funny thing is, everybody treated me like I was like part of the main cast because I was with him, like hanging out, right? And so, but then this doesn't stop yet, Maura. That it go forward another year, I auditioned for a role in Banshee, for a reoccurring role, and I got it. I received that role, which was pretty exciting. That gave me my first, I was eligible then for the union, for the SAG. And I went back and I had a reoccurring role as one of the tribal council members, right? And so it was just an amazing story. And again, I drove to New York for something that I probably could have stayed in North Carolina and but it just all worked out, and then now I find myself here. Again, theater was not an initial motivation for me, but it was, I saw it as a way to stay engaged, right? To stay creative. And then I learned and I began to really understand what it is about theater that people love. Like it captivates you, from an audience, because my family weren't theater goers, right? I didn't grow up going to theater. I didn't grow up acting in the school plays in high school or whatever, and so I didn't have any of that background. But so coming here, because it was, again, I was very like a sponge, and I got to see, but also got to see on an intrinsic side how valuable self-expression is, right? Because we all want to feel validated. We all want to be a little bit more of, in this body, we're limited, right? But through our imagination and our consciousness, we can expand ourselves, right? And so theater allows you to do that, right? It's probably the only thing outside of music and the other arts that allows you to expand and be creative without, I hope a lot of cases, if you're in the right, setting, without judgment, right? Yes. And we all want to feel that freedom, right? And so it has become not only somewhat, I'm not going to say a profession, but work that I do, but it also has become a passion for expression. And it also has become a passion to help guide others to say, even if it's just in conversation, or how they help them to learn to better express themselves, right? And to allow them that space and that ability to do that. And so yeah, it's been a lot, and then the pandemic, oh my gosh, don't even talk about what the pandemic did to theater, right? Because
it was devastating.
Yeah.
But John, so you act, but you also sing, and
Yes.
you dance, and you're a musician and a public speaker, and also you are an MC, right? What is an MC? Am I pronouncing it correct?
MC? MC?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
that's just, like hosting events, and maybe if I'm at a powwow, I can MC the powwow. Recently I was considered an MC or masters of ceremony or whatever you want to call it, facilitator. They'll all kind of go back and forth, But I just recently did an event in New Jersey, which was a great event for the New Jersey Arts Center there. They curated a Native American women's art exhibit there. And I actually, I guided them through the whole program that day. Again, a great experience. I like doing it because I get a chance to engage. And I used to be you wouldn't probably believe this with all the stuff that you just said that I did. Okay. But I was always very afraid to stand up and talk in front
of
really? Yeah. I remember, I'm gonna tell you this little story if I can real quick.
Yes.
I can talk a lot, so I'm sorry if I get too long. But when I was a little kid, I grew up in the South, right? So my parents are from North Carolina. I was born in DC, but I spent a lot of time in North Carolina. And we used to do these little things when I was a kid in school. I mean, in church and school in elementary age, where they call it resuscitations or reciting like biblical quotes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would get assigned one every spring, right, around Easter. And it might be 2 sentences or 3. I was so nervous to go stand up, and I had to memorize this, right? I couldn't read. I'm not supposed to read from the paper. And I would be so nervous. And I remember going up there in front of my elders and family, and I would stay up there for minutes to try to figure out the first word to say. I never had a problem like with stammering or stuttering or anything like that, but it was so difficult and I feared it so much. And so you would never think that I would perform in theater or film or television, right?
And here you are.
Yeah, here I am. And that's the irony of a few things, of course, growing up, maturing. But the thing that I felt like, and I was just going to share this, the thing that got me really over the hump and outside of my own personal fear, right? Because fear is you're creating a situation that doesn't exist, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people live in that space. They never want to do anything because they fear the unknown. They fear something that may or may not ever happen, right? But it starts to control how they act, right? But when an elder once told me, which was a very valuable message, he said, if you're ever asked to speak, you have an opportunity to possibly educate and share something, if it's the smallest minuscule thing that could help someone else out there that hears this message, hears it. You don't know who that is. You don't know what that is. It is not up to me to decide what it is, right? Because the personal that it affects or touches, it's their personal experience on how they received it, right? And how it affected them. It's not about me. I just may be the conduit or the one that delivers it. And so once he told me that, it changed my whole perspective. And so I get excited out of maybe like nervousness, right? Because I want to do a great job or go on theater, go on stage and do a great delivery of my monologue or whatever. But the one thing that keeps me grounded is to know that whatever I say or do could affect someone in a positive way, hopefully a positive way on the other side of hearing that message and experiencing that, right? And that took all the nervousness and fear, the fear away from me. That's how I've been able to do what I've been able to do,